Welcome to the Learning and Development Podcast, sponsored by Infopro Learning. As always, I'm your host, Nolan Hout. Today, we have Josh Remerowski joining us. We're going to be talking about a very timely topic today, outsourcing versus insourcing. Especially for the large companies that we're talking to, we're seeing a lot of trends in organizations looking for a little bit more of a mature strategy on how to leverage these partners to get real value versus maybe just the older way of looking at it as outsourcers and vendors are just an extra set of hands to do this work for me. Excited to get into it. Let's go ahead and meet our guest, Josh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the topic of outsourcing, insourcing, and everything that goes with it, would love to learn a little bit more about your background in this space. What we found is that a lot of times people in the L&D spectrum have taken kind of an interesting path to where they are. Sometimes the origin story is pretty linear. Sometimes it has lots of zigs and zags. So what's your story, Josh?
I don't even know if mine zigs and zags. It's definitely unconventional. Pretty much I feel like my entire life has been pretty unconventional. But yeah, I started out as a truck driver, a temporary truck driver at FedEx after I dropped out of college. My senior year, I played baseball in college and had some troubles my last year and
Oh, no.
dropped out. And so started driving truck. And so driving a big truck and then to a small truck to get a stable job with FedEx. And then I did a field tech role for DirecTV, installing, satellite and cable internet
Yeah.
for them for a while. Did outside sales for Comcast, and then, eventually decided to get a desk job and see what that was like to work in air conditioning. Thought that would be pretty cool. Never did that in my life. I'd only done like construction and landscaping and a bunch of things like that. So started at Verizon probably back in 2011. And, as I was working there, I found there was an opportunity to get into the HR space and do something with development. I never really knew what learning and development was. I didn't know really much about HR. Like most people, I thought all HR does is fire people. I didn't realize that. People still today tell me that when I tell them I work in HR. They're like, "Oh, so you fire people?" And so I think there's always those misconceived notions of what HR does and what it provides an organization. So I grew my career from Verizon and learning and development as a training facilitator. I was an instructional designer. I did a lot of stuff with technology, leadership development. And then I moved over to Walmart and was leading talent and learning for them in e-commerce. And then I started leading some change management, some of their HR tech, their onboarding, and some strategy work under their customer pillar of their organization, which was a lot of fun. And I did that for a few years and then was lucky to work at a global organization called Fortive in the manufacturing and software space. And then they have some precision technology. They just recently spun off to a company called Ralliant. And I was, basically their chief learning officer. So I was the head of, learning and development and leadership development for that company. And now I'm here at SRS and it's been great. I lead the learning function for enterprise for all of our employees, similar to my last job at Fortive, and building leadership experiences and things that are simple, fun, and relatable to the job is what we try to do. And more than anything, just make it a great place to work.
Is there something that you feel like drew you to the talent side of things? Was it just like the innate curiosity of like, I don't know what they do, I'd like to figure it out? Or was it, I had really good coaches growing up and, or personal trainers that kind of led me through baseball, or maybe I had really bad coaches. I wanted to be a better one.
I've had lots of bad coaches. That's part of the reason why I dropped out of college, because, I've been around people that are difficult most of my life. And so having, coming from like an abusive childhood and dad and person that was in and out of jail and in and out of my life, to having coaches that talk to you and yell at you. And you see this in professional coaching where coaches do that. And
100%.
I've never been really responsive to that. I don't like it. And it's not great when you don't have control of a situation and people don't treat you well or treat you fairly. And so, I experienced that with every coach, through most of my career at every level of baseball through Division I. And I always knew, like, if I would ever get the opportunity, originally I thought I was going to be a baseball coach.
Right.
But if I had the opportunity to steward and, guide people in their lives, their development, in the things that they love or the things that provide their livelihood, man, I would do it a lot differently. And so when I realized there was this opportunity in the corporate world, as I was figuring out what do I want to do as a grown up, I just knew for sure that I would focus on being as transparent as I can, having humility, working really hard, and then figuring out how to cast vision so people understand like where we're going, why we're going there. Like there's a purpose to the things that we're doing. We're not just working to work. So that really sparked it. And then, baseball, as you mentioned, there's a lot of failure. And so if you want to play baseball for a long time, you have to be willing to put in the work. You have to be willing to constantly figure out a new way to do something because you might get in a slump or things might not be working mid-game or in an at-bat or whatever that looks like. So for me, just constantly developing and figuring things out, so it's just always a passion. And I'm lucky enough to now do that in the HR space and learning and development space.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you swore off of baseball afterwards, or if you still like. I think you saw. I'm a big Giants fan. This is when it was Pac Bell Park, and my son's named Wrigley because my wife's
That's
a big
awesome.
Cubs fan. So definitely still Ryan, and Nolan is after Nolan Ryan.
Yep, that's awesome.
According to my dad, I was supposed to be Nolan Ryan, but somehow I just didn't have it in me. Who knows why? So
Not
shared
many
it.
of us can be Nolan Ryan. So yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's a better thing. So cool. Well, it sounds like one of the things that I definitely heard was, and I've heard this before from another high, obviously if you're pitching at a D1 level, that's the highest level of college you can get. I spoke to another high performing athlete, Lisa Willis. She was on the women's gold medal winning USA team for basketball, and her answer was like, I just had terrible coaches. And I just kept thinking that if I had the opportunity to coach people, I would do it so much better. And a lot of it was what you talked about was they just never taught me the bigger vision of what am I trying to do here. Like it was so, this is the jump step, or this is, hold the grip like this, or push a little bit more with your index finger at the end versus like, okay, let's talk a little bit of a bigger level strategy. What are we trying to do here? And now you're in that role, and you have been, I think, in the past couple companies, which leads us into this topic today. I think a lot of times, in enterprise organizations, especially, this decision of who do we work with, how do we leverage our talent becomes one of your biggest challenges, I would assume, and biggest calls to action is how do I leverage the resources that I have, my resources being my people, being my time, being my money. And when you look at that, outsourcing, vendors, partners, whatever word you want to call them. I think for whatever reason, partners sounds nicer than outsourcing, but we can go with whatever we want to use. How do you, when you sit back, how do you even start planning? Is this like an annual thing? What is your overall strategy for looking at the battlefield, the field in front of you, and determining what is going to be my path here for who I put on what?
Well, one, you never have enough people and never enough hands to do the work. So having vendors, is what I would typically refer to it at. But I think partners, great. To your point, I think a lot of people like, using language like that. But when I look to use vendors, it's simply because, hey, I already know I'm not going to have enough people for whatever I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
that's the reality. And the other reality is whatever I think I'm going to need next year, I'm probably going to have even less. And that's most learning and development, most HR functions reality in general. I've
Yep.
never worked anywhere, and I'm sure you haven't, where there's been enough time, enough people, enough money. It doesn't it doesn't work. This isn't the movie Blank Check. So for me, I look at it, longer term of how can I talk to as many vendors as possible to
Right.
find out what's available, what are they best at? Like, they all provide a lot of the same services, but some are better at things than others. When you look at quality of product,
Yep.
speed of turnaround, nearshore, onshore, offshore. So for me, it's first looking at like, how can I have this kind of coalition of people that I know I can rely on when I need it because I know I'll need it? And then what are the things I can start putting out in front of them to get an idea of like, what does their sample work look like on something small? So I do a lot of proof of concept
Right.
to get really, hey, what's the barrier of entry with this team, with their product, and working with them. And then now I have like, okay, there's some people that are maybe like, if I really need something scrappy and it doesn't impact the culture, it doesn't require a lot of context, and the stakes aren't super high, I have this group of vendors that I can use. It's cheap, it's fast, it's going to get the job done. My team doesn't have the time to do it. My team might not also have the skill set to do it. And then I have the, like the middle tier of vendors that's, there's a little more time, a little more time, a little more money. Maybe there's some cultural nuance where we have to work with them a little bit, but not a ton, but we have to work with the vendor a little bit to say, hey, like, this doesn't really make sense. This is how our company looks or how it's structured. These are the customers we serve, like contextually, because depending on your business, it could be so different than maybe what the vendor company has worked with previously. And then I have the other tier, which is like, hey, this is the stuff that the executives are paying attention to. They might be sitting in. I'm going to vet them like they're on a jury to, and they all want it, right? They want to sell me their product. And I think that's admirable. And I understand it. And a lot of them want me to move really fast. And it's like, well, okay, that's great, but I'm not going to put this in front of my CEO or my CHRO, my boss, or the executive team, and have never seen it and have no idea like what the actual quality is or the things that you're going to say. And some vendors understand that, some do not. But because I've worked with others in the past, like I have a really good idea of who I put in that category of, hey, who can be a little more accelerated through this process to get in. And those things that have like that high tier, they're going to cost more money. They're going to require more hands-on from myself and potentially executives, because it is so important to know our culture, and it has to be really tied with meaning. And so I look at that and I say, who are my people for what? And I have that picture. And so when I look at next year or the year after and I say, I want to do this, I want to do that, something with technology, I already know who I need to start talking to. And I already know who are the people I'm going to test some things with, who can help us in a pinch. And we have that on my team when we do our strategy. It's like, okay, well, hey, I need you to work with these folks. I'm going to send you their way.
Yep.
And you're going to do X, Y, Z. And that's what I found the most helpful is like, is it cultural impacting or is it not? And, do you need something scrappy or do we need something really refined? And who's going to see this versus, who might not see it or whatever, because it's just a lower impacting functionality. And then I keep it in tiers, and, and I look at that lower tier. That could be your Fiverr, Upwork, or something really small for some like small gig, something super scrappy. Most of the other vendors fall in that like medium, that medium tier. And then I have a very few people for like the bigger projects that I would say are really more executive facing. And that's worked for me. I'm sure everyone has their process, but that's the process that's worked for me. And it's allowed us to stay nimble and do some really, really great things and work with vendors in a really great way. And we'll continue to do it. We'll continue to use vendors for things, and we'll continue to use our own internal teams for things, but we'll weigh the options every time as we plan and have a great time doing it. I've enjoyed pretty much every vendor I've worked with to this point in my career. So,
yeah, and I think what you touched on, in addition to that, you mentioned kind of your, the ones that you vet pretty heavily are those that are touching your culture, and I think what I think sometimes, both on our side of the house, the vendor side of the house, and then also on the client side of the house, that we undervalue is the time it takes to shake hands and know each other's business and understand that if we don't do that up front, we're missing out. But we also sometimes try to do that when it's not needed. I've definitely, Infopro definitely has fallen a victim to hey, we're just using you in tier 3 right now. Like this is a tier 3 project, meaning, we need you to create 50 assets or
Yep.
something like that, right? And they're, whatever. Even if it's a high value, it's not, we're not, it's not a high touch or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we're looking for that investment when you're just looking for, hey, I just needed this to be kind of done, and I'm not really looking to invest a
Yeah.
lot of my time in it. But then when you do get to that top level, that's why I would assume, what I traditionally see is the number of people at that tier A list is one, two, maybe, because you do have to invest so much of your time as a client to say, I want to, which is why, if you track CLO movement, a lot of times when a CLO moves a job, they bring their vendor with them
Yep.
because they have that relationship. Maybe they don't know the business, because they're in a new business, but they know, okay, they know how I like to operate. And if they're an extension of me, I need that tight handshake. One of the things you touched on though was, I do some work internally, I do some work externally. What, in your mind, how are you determining that? Is it in like real time? Is it you kind of plot out your next 6 months? I mean, 6 months, a year, 6 months even now seems like an eternity with how fast things are changing. So maybe it's not even 6 months, but how do you sit down and really make that call, insource versus outsource?
Well, you have to know the skills of your team too.
Yeah.
So I evaluate my skills, like of myself, my team, pretty ruthlessly. So I'm not full of smoke and mirrors to think maybe I'm more talented or my team is more talented than they actually are in certain areas. And it doesn't mean they can't do things, but to be able to execute some gamified thing at the highest level versus, just getting
Right.
it done, or building a highly interactive, crazy variable e-learning scenario with really great video and completely cohesive branding versus just building an e-learning scenario. We look at that. So I look at 3 years out of what I want to do. My team will really focus on what we want to do this year. And for me, it's more about, okay, I know the experiences because my vision, right, is how do we create the best experiences for our employees? So I know what experiences we want to work on, how we want to evolve them and elevate them or
Yep.
improve them. And then from there, we determine, does my team have the skill to do this or not? And now, as we move forward, like the landscape and the makeup of my team could change. So we will pivot and be adaptable come that time, to your point, where, hey, if I end up hiring someone that now has this skill set that we're missing today because 6 months have passed and we're finally getting around to working on this project, well, now I might say I'm not going to outsource it. I'm going to insource it because this person has the time. But
Yeah.
I still have to evaluate, is this the right thing for them to spend their time on, depending on what other priorities and things we have going on. Because yet again, I never have enough time, I never have enough money, I never have enough people, and that's everyone in most departments in most companies. And so I'm constantly reevaluating it. But I know the
Yeah.
things 3 years from now that I want to use a vendor for, 2 years from now, a year from now. I have an idea of which vendors I want to evaluate for that, which ones I've
Yeah.
used in the past that have been very successful. And then there will be projects that come up all the time. Like we're working on one right now where it's just like, hey, send that to this person on Fiverr because we've used them in the past. They can get it done really quickly. It doesn't cost anything. And they don't need to know anything about the company. Like they just need to be able to edit this thing and make it look good. So that's been my process, and I just find it works really well. Is to know like where I see based on what the experience is
Yeah.
we
It,
want to create. And
and
to your point, I know I have a list of people I've just it continues to
yeah.
compile and grow over time that it makes that decision easier. And I just continually meet with new vendors to evolve the roster,
Yeah.
right? You want to have the
Yeah.
strongest roster of people you can work with to get the best job done, period.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just yesterday, we're creating a new product, first ever time trying to go B2C, right? So we're in enterprise, but we're selling a Gen AI tool specifically for IDs is the thing.
Awesome.
And I have a design team and they're great. And they're not high cost, but like they're Infopro resources. but I knew like I wanted the style to be a certain way. And I was like, there's no way the time it's going to take for me to get them on board to this style is so long. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to webflow.com. Webflow is kind of like a GoDaddy Squarespace kind of thing. And I said, there's got to be a template that match. So I just spent 30 minutes looking for a template. Cost me $80. I said, okay, I'll buy it and I'll just throw my content in. And then I sold that vision this morning to our CEO. And I said, listen, this is the brand. Now, again, it has nothing to do with whether my team could do it. They absolutely could. But for $80, I got exactly what I needed out of it. Now I'm going to throw that away. Now I'm going to take that and give that to my team. So you're right. Like we make these decisions all the time. But one of the things I'm interested in, because I remember when I pushed our team to move towards tools like this, I had a little bit of pushback of, well, geez, Nolan, if we're doing if you're going to use these tools, do I need to cut my design staff? How do you manage that culturally, those kind of decisions? Like, do you feel that that's something, or maybe you don't have to manage it? Maybe your team is not really feeling like these people are my competitors because eventually I'm just going to give my job away to them. I think that's a bit of a fear I see sometimes in my own team, and I know it exists in other teams as well. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with whether it's AI, whether it's
Yeah.
using a vendor, someone on your team has had the experience and will continue to have the experience where, oh, this thing happened at my last job, so that means it's
Right.
going to happen here. So even if it's not true, I still have to communicate transparently, like, what does this mean?
Right.
And nothing about the future of your company, of your business model, of your whoever your customers are, nothing about that is certain. Like that is the
True.
part of
Yeah.
doing business that's most difficult, that many individual contributors within a business, don't appreciate. And I think often they forget that most companies aren't just sitting on a pile of cash that's endless to pay people. So, they're running on very thin windows of,
Yeah.
if we don't make the quarter, if we don't make this, that, um, you know, that's where most companies don't last in the long run. And so for me, it's like you have to be creative and you have to know like when to get lean, when to grow up, and when to outsource, when to not
Right.
outsource. But the change piece is always going to be there because someone's had a bad experience within the
Yeah.
past, and it means this. And so I'm always upfront. I'm as transparent as I possibly can be when it comes to managing that. And that at the end of the day, if people are doing, if they're doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing and creating value, having a good, you're having a good attitude,
Yep.
improving the culture, driving better business outcomes with your work, being like having a good brand, it's very difficult, for anyone to justify letting you go. It's very
Yep.
difficult to justify outsourcing, something. But it still doesn't mean it won't happen. I mean, it's just, you don't know what the business environment is going to look like. And it can create uncertainty for your team. So all I try to do is just communicate those things as transparently as possible. And, more than anything, just let them know like, hey, we
Yeah.
will. So like, for example, when I came to this company, I let my team first thing know, like, hey, we will outsource things. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
now that doesn't mean you're going to do any less work,
Yeah.
but we will. Like, we don't have enough people. Like my last company, same thing. We don't have enough people. So we have to outsource facilitation sometimes. We have to outsource instructional design sometimes. We have to outsource administration sometimes. We have to outsource development of content or video
Right.
creation or whatever. And I just let them know so there's no surprises where all of a sudden we're bringing it up and it's like, well, this has never been mentioned. So I just think if you're just transparent and are good at communicating the vision and having a vision as a leader that, hey, we will use outsourcing partners, we will use vendors, we will communicate when and where, and this will always be a changing, evolving thing. Most of your team won't have surprises. It doesn't mean they're going to love it or
Right.
don't think that they should be the one working on this project versus the other thing. That will always happen from time to time, but I just always try to set the tone early and be very clear.
Yeah. And I, at the heart of that, and you've been discussing it you've been weaving it through, and we both have, but just calling out this idea of ROI. Where am I going to get my bang for my buck? And I think a lot of it comes down to ROI. So how are you leveraging, or how are you, I guess, holding your vendors, and I guess since you've mentioned it, and your employees, like how are you measuring ROI, but specifically of your vendors, and then maybe if you want to kind of segue into internal.
I look at both the same. So anywhere I've worked where I've used vendors and employees, I've
Right.
been lucky enough to work for Verizon, which was a fantastic organization at measuring the impact of learning and all
Yeah.
the way up to Philips to the fifth level for ROI. And so I tell my team, same thing. When I joined here, it's like, we are going to measure things. We're not just going to do things and just produce things and not having any idea of like, are we making an impact or not? And so if it's a vendor versus in-house, like I have a cost analysis that I look at, like how much per hour does it cost my employee
Yeah.
that I pay that's not free to work here to build this if they spend 100 hours or 40 hours working on it versus what would it take the vendor? Maybe the vendor could do it in 20 hours because they've already built this kind of material, already have it out of the box, need to
Totally.
reskin it, whatever. What is the cost benefit analysis of that? And that goes back into having the tiers. And if it doesn't require a lot of the cultural nuance, I already know the cost to do it, which will yield potentially better ROI, will be lower. And so we first evaluate like where's that cost trade-off? And then usually like if it's something in the middle is where you'll be able to truly measure the ROI versus like the really high tier programs usually cost so much money. They're near impossible to get your ROI back, at least sometimes for a couple years because they're so long, or it's some type of executive development program. And the scrappy stuff, there's not much, like there's no context. And so, we look at beyond like, do people like it? Like, what are the KPIs? What are the actual metrics that'll be moved? My team works with those stakeholders, and then we make sure that they have no concerns if we were to outsource something. Like, hey, are you worried
Yeah.
about us not being the person creating this because there probably is some cultural nuance, and are you good with also working with this vendor and communicating with them because normally you would be working with us, and
Right.
we want to make sure that we're not now the middleman in the process that slows it down. And so we look at the metrics and we look at when do we think there's going to be a break-even point and what would it take to be successful. And we measure against a control group and all those things. We have our assumptions going into it of what we think the ROI would be and where we expect. And we try to do that in a very cautious manner. And then, post 6 months, we'll look at performance for the different groups and say like, hey, are we promoting them at a higher level? Are their engagement scores better if they're a leadership team? Is their branch performance, outperforming their peer group that didn't go through this experience? Or sales up or sales down? All of those safety violations up or down, whatever the metric are we're looking at, we look at the real data. And now if it's successful with a vendor, then it just brings more confidence to my team that says, oh, well, okay, the
Yeah.
experience was
Absolutely.
great. Employees loved it. We got ROI. Like there was actual better business outcomes driven, and we didn't do it. Like we just partnered with this company that was able to build something amazing. And we still have to execute, obviously.
Yeah.
Like we still have our big part of executing most of the time when you use a vendor. Like some will execute with facilitation and some other things, but most of the time you still have to be the person that executes, sets up the follow-ups, embeds it into what you're doing. But I think as long as you approach it that way, it can be very, very successful. And you have to look at it up front. You can't say, now that this thing's happened, let's
Correct.
measure it. So my team goes into everything we do with a plan of what does this look like to measure it? And there's some things you just can't measure. Like it just won't be effective and it'll be a waste of time. And we evaluate that too. And then just say, all right, well, we'll get them on the next one. We know this is going to be a loss potentially, but it's going to cost us less to outsource it than it would be to insource it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think So what I'm hearing you say is that the ROI equation, right? There's a couple of factors of it. One is how much am I going out? So what is it going to cost internal, external, and then external, like between the externals as well, right? Like, okay, how can I get my price, whatever. So, okay, now I know this project would roughly cost me X to do it in-house, Y to do it out-house. Now let's look what's coming back to the fold. If I'm going to leverage my internal team, I think I'm going to get this. If I'm going to leverage well, more than likely you're saying I need this back. I don't care who's going to deliver it. I now want to know what I got to spend to get this back. But I make that call up front. And I think that's the super important thing that, we started mandating at our company is you have to have any proposal. You have to have an ROI statement attached to it now that just says, listen, if a company is spending money with us, because especially these days with so much volatility in the market, there's so much scrutiny under anything over a certain dollar
Yeah.
amount. And so if you don't have a really clear picture of what is this going to do for the company, and it's not always crystal clear, like you said, like some things are kind of small, like I'm designing, I don't know, $20,000, couple hours of e-learning, whatever it should be. Maybe I'm not going to be able to show 50,000 back, but what am I going to be able to show? Okay, well, the satisfaction score should at least be this much. We should at least reach this amount. So I do like how you're looking at it from both sides of the equation, not just like let's just find the cheapest way to get it done, and go with it. And so as we kind of go towards the second end of this podcast, at first we've talked a lot of strategy, now a little bit more, I always say more execution focused. Like, what are those, if you were to look back at, I think when I know the companies that you were with, I know Walmart, and I forgot the one in the middle, a couple, but the last couple companies that you were with, when you were at the top, kind of making these decisions of what goes where. Historically, at these last organizations you've been at, what do you see as those like low-hanging fruit? Hey, this just makes sense to outsource all day, every day. Obviously, there's nuance, but but if you were to say every time I step into an organization, I'm looking for these 4 or 5 things, they absolutely are primed to get out.
Yeah, I think you always want to have a few people that can facilitate
Yeah,
certain
true.
leadership
Yeah,
experiences. There's just things that don't make sense for you to get people certified in because people come and go in your company. So you spend all this money getting them certified and then they're gone 2 years and you have to pay another person to get certified. And a lot of those experiences require zero cultural nuance to
right.
deliver. So you always want to have, like for me, you always want to have people that can facilitate
True.
leadership,
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
keynote speeches, whatever it is, that on specific topics that are important and pretty much every company you'll work for need.
Right.
So whether it's emotional intelligence, servant
Yeah.
leadership,
Yeah.
whatever, have a small group of those. It could be Hogan's or whatever else, where you have people that can run those kind of executive development. I'm certified in all of them, but like if I leave here and no one's certified in them, who are the people you can contact that can run a workshop, that can do a debrief, can do the executive coaching, whatever. So to me, you always want people in that bucket, to be able to deliver those experiences. And so I always think about that just because it's not a super repeatable thing because you're
Correct.
always going to have gaps in talent. And then when I look at administrative things, so you can outsource them or use AI now if you have the right
Yep.
talent on your team or the right technology people in your company. So can you use RPA or UiPath or to automate your processes that maybe you have team members that should be doing higher value work that like a human can provide
Yeah.
and you need their brain to do. So can AI do that, or can you outsource that at a lower cost basis? That's always something that I've looked at. And then you just have to make a determination. But I think administrative work's always somewhere on that list. And then for me, the other thing at my companies is just having people that can develop like content. So So whether it's e-learnings,
Yeah.
course facilitations, gamification, having folks that say, okay, if I need to create this experience and it requires a lot of dedication, a lot of thought, potentially someone that's done it before because no one on my team's ever created it. It's just this thing we've imagined. Probably an outsourced partner is going to be best to use and is going to allow us to work with that vendor and get a way higher quality product. So I always have people that I know like, hey, let's talk to this person. I know they can do exactly what we want, build the experience the exact way we can. I know you've never done it as an individual contributor on my team, but here's the great news. You're going to go work with this vendor. You're going to learn a ton. You're going to learn how to work with a vendor. You're going to learn how to build a really great learning experience that you've never created. And then now you have this person you can tuck in your pocket when you grow your career and go somewhere else. To your point, you can bring them with you. Now that relationship carries with you to where if the next company has the same kind of problem that you can't solve because you don't have enough people, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough resources, great. Let's get creative and figure out how a vendor can come in and potentially help us. And so I look in those three buckets as what I've found works really well. But so admin, content development, and then there's always something with, leadership development or executive development that falls in there.
Yeah, I love that you touched on this idea of experience with a vendor being valuable. I was chatting with a good buddy of mine who leads learning at a finance company, and he's looking to go into some other avenues. And I said, I was like, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm not their vendor. We don't work together. I don't know if we ever should, because we know each other. I said, listen, I come to you not telling you to give us work, but where you are really weak is on your vendor relationships. And that drives a lot of CLOs, like of the decision-making process, because when they come in, they're expected to do a lot of these things, and they can't move a ship fast enough by hiring. They just really can't. And so I said, I as a vendor, I'm hard pressed to tell you that you got to go start working with vendors more. But like, if you view them as a necessary evil, you actually are not well suited to lead a large, a leadership company, because you need to leverage that. They need to be a critical cog in your wheel.
You won't be able to
giving
do it.
people, giving people experience with this is how you leverage a vendor relationship versus an employee relationship, I think is a really valuable thing that you're doing for your team.
Yeah, because to your point, like you're going to be asked to do a bunch of things when you come in as a CLO, and something will change in the business where you don't have the money to do those things, but they're still going to expect you to do those things because the business needs it. The business needs it. There's a performance gap, a behavior gap, a skill gap, whatever it looks like. And if you can't figure it out, because you've never worked with vendors or you don't have people in your network that can help you accomplish that thing fast, you will not survive. Like you will be gone. I've seen a lot of people like not last very long. And you watch them actually start going the opposite way in their career versus elevating their career. So I agree with that. And I found that, even coming in here where because I've worked with so many different vendors over the years, to me, what's most important is they work with so many different companies. Like you work with so many different companies.
Yeah, true.
The odds that I have a problem that you haven't solved before are like zero. Like, it's very rare, or you've done something adjacent enough to the problem that you can figure it out a lot faster. And I think so many people think their problems are so unique and it's just my company. And it's like, well, that's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard. Like almost every company has the same problems, the same constraints, the same, skill gaps, because we're all working towards the same thing when it comes to growth. And we're all adapting and dealing with the same market and volatility and changes. And so to your point, like talk to a vendor, have that because they have solved your problem. Now, whether you can afford it or not afford it or whatever, you need to figure out your tiers. But that's what I love about having vendors in my network is like, there's no way some vendor in my network hasn't solved the issue that I need help with.
Yeah, and I mean, I use this all the time, and I'm always kind of perplexed anytime I'm doing something new. I go to LinkedIn, see who is in this space. I shoot them a message and I say, "Hey, I would love to buy you coffee. Can you just tell me of your experience?" Like there was a guy had spent 20 years at Ford, and we were trying to understand the automotive industry, and he had moved on. And I just wrote, and I just said, "Hey, I don't know anything about your space. I just want to learn. Would you teach me for 30 minutes? Like,
Yeah.
what do you look for in a vendor?" And it was fascinating. He said, "I have never heard somebody just ask for help. Like, no, and people are willing to do it. Like, they are absolutely ready and willing. And that's one of my favorite things about this podcast has actually been my ability to call back on people or actually to help people who have said, oh, I need somebody who knows this. And I'm like, oh, well, Josh has done this like 1,000 times. Just go talk to Josh. And making those connections are really, really strong because you said, your problems are maybe nuanced, but not incredibly unique. One of the things you touched on, and I want to talk on it really quickly since I don't think you're allowed to have a session without talking about AI. I think it's illegal. They just shut it down right off the bat. How is AI kind of changing how you view sourcing? Because one of the things you mentioned was, well, maybe this isn't a skill set that I have. So one of the things that we're starting to realize is organizations are coming to us saying our ability to develop those skills, technology, whatever internally it's going to take us a long time to get there. We just want you to do it. Like you be our AI studio. We will do what we're going to do. You do that. But everybody is taking a little bit of a different approach. How is this changing your thinking on your sourcing strategy? Again, internal and external.
Well, I think AI is going to replace a lot of that like bottom tier, like
Yep.
the scrappy,
Yep.
quick turnaround, low cost. So for
Yep.
me, like that's what I've already seen. Like my team uses a lot of AI across the board. Now, there are levels of skill in leveraging the tools. And because generative AI is just like the start, like if you get into like agentic AI and some of the more sophisticated things that are happening right now with the LLMs, like it's fantastic. But my team doesn't know all that or isn't entrenched
Right.
in that world. And to your point, like their level of literacy with what AI can be used for and what it can do, and probably what a lot of people right now, like it's limited to just generative AI. Like I can use this GPT, like this thing can happen. So for me, a lot of the stuff that people know of can replace that bottom tier. And the way I'm, thinking about it now is what companies offer AI products that we can't build or scale or
True.
um, might take multi-year development to make work the way we want that give you that jump start. And it goes back into having a proof of concept. Like let's do a proof of
Right.
concept. Let's figure out, hey, you're telling me your tool does all these things and AI can do all these things and you want me to sign a 3-year contract or whatever. But like, how about let's prove it? Let's prove in a 6-month window that it can actually do all the things that you say. And and then we'll be able to know for sure it's something we can't do.
Right.
Uh, which it becomes very evident with certain tools. You're like, we could have never done this, like, or it would have taken us 2 years or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like, who
Yeah.
has 2 years working for a corporation to do anything? So,
2 months,
uh,
2 days.
so I look at it that way. I just look at like, hey, that's how I've been thinking about is most of the tools I'm using. How can we continue to use AI to replace most of the administrative things that
Yep.
that you'd want to outsource that make their jobs easier, quicker, faster, more efficient, all that jazz. And then what companies can help us, whether it's think about AI differently, provide tools that can enhance and be bolted on to like our platform and how we develop people within our company. Um, and then if there's like really bespoke tool, like up in that top tier,
Mhm.
which we're working towards with some experiences we're doing in the next year, what would that look like and how much level of effort is it going to take to make using AI in this context with executives not look like a freaking, disaster, but like be super effective, because AI still gets it wrong. AI is not
Yeah, of
perfect. It's
course.
all of those things. Um, but I've been looking at it that way, and I keep it in the same tiers, and I think eventually it'll, it'll just be a partner to the middle tier. Like I think
Yeah.
you'll find you'll still need some human intervention because of the cultural nuance for now. Agentic AI, will probably leap past that at some point with just the proactiveness of the model, but I think it's going to be very interesting. And for right now, I'm just focused on how do we eliminate the scrappy
Totally.
realm
Yeah.
and then just partner in the middle realm the best we can.
Yeah, we worked with a company on like an 18-month AI transformation, and we said, to start, let's just save money. Let's just do this stuff. But then, like you mentioned, it's kind of an arc of, okay, once we have that, but we know the third state, the happy spot is actually we're not serving content that way anymore, right? We're not delivering, I don't know, 30-minute web-based training. We're putting an agent where they live, where the customer could just act like we're doing something right now with a leadership bot. We're like, listen, do people still want to sit through an hour of LinkedIn learning to take, how do I ask for a raise? Or do they want to ask a bot, how do I ask for a raise right when I need a raise? And do they just want the answer? Like, so
Yeah.
yeah, it is a transformation. I implore all of you though, do not get caught up on trying to start at point 3,
No.
because then you won't do anything. Please do not let yourself get bogged down in step 3. Please start with step 1. See how much money and time you can save. Like just
Yeah.
do step 1. The 3 is really cool, super exciting, changes the game, but saving a lot of money is also really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
with that, Josh, thank you so much for investing your time. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Really appreciate you, sharing some of your wisdom with us here over this last hour.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, Josh, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk again soon.
Bye.
Thanks.